Hello, hello again to another Agricolor reaction. Today we have another date night with Eric. Yay! And it's kind of a different video.
Yes. Shimai got this one for me.
Yes.
I watched European news and it changed me as an American.
But not him, because he doesn't
Not
watch
me,
it.
that's the title.
It's the title.
By Type Ashton? Ashton,
I guess. Ashton Carter. Yeah. Alright, let's just jump into it and see.
Good evening from our CBS newsroom in New York on this, the first broadcast of network television's first daily half-hour news program.
Way back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, the news media was widely seen as one of the most trusted institutions in the United States. But today, it sits at the bottom of that list, along with Congress in most surveys as the most untrustworthy democratic organization in the country.
We're the only network that's telling the truth right now.
Fake news.
We're simply better than the opposition.
Politicians can't rewrite history on their own. They need enablers. They need media enablers.
It's one of those facts of everyday American life that I imagine if you're a US citizen watching this video, you're probably saying, well, duh, did we really need a survey for that?
We apologize for adding to that nonsense and anti-human hysteria.
Everybody knows that the media has a bit of a credibility issue. But as an American who now lives abroad, I found myself wondering, is this partisan, untrustworthy reporting unique to the United States? How does American media stack up against European outlets on their ability to be transparent, independent, and accurate? And ultimately, how biased is the media really? Well, let's take a look. Like a lot of stories about politics and modern American culture, this story begins in the middle of the 20th century. Following the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, a major political realignment began to take place in American politics, a realignment that today has resulted in partisan ideological consistency on both sides of the aisle. As Democrats increasingly aligned around a liberal, progressive agenda and Republicans along a conservative one, it became more and more common for Americans to evaluate any number of policies, programs, and institutions through their particular partisan lens. While a political polarization upheaval was taking place in Washington, when the average American turned on their television to learn about it during this period of time, their news reporting was primarily limited to three major news networks: CBS, ABC, and NBC. With only a handful of channels available for broadcast, the United States government issued licenses to the networks and also put regulations in place to ensure fair treatment in their coverage, like the Fairness Doctrine, enacted in 1949. The Fairness Doctrine was part of the entrance of the federal government in the regulation of access to the airwaves for television and radio. In short, you have to have balance. So for example, if there's a presentation on one point of view, you had to have a contrary point of view. And if a public official was attacked, they had the right to reply. But as cable TV grew in popularity and dozens of channels entered the airwaves, well, all someone had to do if they wanted to get a contrary point of view was change the channel. Theoretically. So the Fairness Doctrine was phased out by President Ronald Reagan's FCC in 1987. Setting the stage for a radical transformation of the way Americans get their news. Today, humans across the globe, American or not, have more access to information than ever before. The problem that such access creates, however, is that this information, including information relating to significant controversial issues, is frequently presented in a very biased manner. Cable news is a business after all, and businesses run on ratings and advertisements, and in order to capture people's attention, it needs to be engaging. And it has, increasingly, blurred the lines between information and entertainment.
Now that I use Monday service.
Monday service. Have anything to say?
Not yet, no.
Did you watch a lot of news when you were in the States?
When I was a kid, I remember my mother would watch the news, and I sit there and watch it with us. But there's only one TV, and whenever they're watching, that's what you're watching.
Yeah, I grew up with that too. Different now. TVs living room and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah. Big difference compared to today.
Yeah.
So there's that's usually at night as well. So you could go outside to play, or you can go to your room, but something different on the news. Usually watch out
Where
for
you
the
have your
screen.
consoles connected to?
The younger kid. One TV.
No. Alright, with your mom, yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't have a console there?
No.
Just with your dad?
Yeah.
So you didn't really play all the time?
No. This was like before.
Even before that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an Atari.
And after?
There was an Atari, but you know, you played an Atari for like 10 minutes and you're good. At 2600. You're going to play for so long. You're going to spend hours playing games. Maybe a good 20 minutes.
Okay.
Big difference in games. When Nintendo came around, then yeah, you played hours.
BC, CNN to Newsmax, while their names include the word news, much of their programming isn't news at all, but rather opinions about the news to garner larger and larger audiences. And love it or hate it, the ratings tell us that it works.
We keep kicking their ass every day in the ratings.
Number one.
Number one, that's us. Probably the most powerful news agency in the world right now.
Despite ranking low in trust and high in political bias, among the 52 outlets polled by YouGov, Fox News and CNN top the list in terms of the share of Americans who say they've used each as a source for news in the past month. The divisive tone of cable news has become the very nature of its appeal. According to Gallup, who's been tracking this for decades, by the way, in the United States, in 1973, most Americans expressed a high degree of trust and confidence in the news media to do its job. Democrats at 74% and Republicans at 68% were generally on the same page about this. But by 2024, while the media had lost considerable ground with both groups, as well as with independents, by the way, the gap had widened dramatically, with just 12% of Republicans trusting the media, compared to 54% of Democrats. In truth, there is very little overlap between the news sources that both Democrats and Republicans trust. Except for, interestingly, the Weather Channel, which hilariously is the one media news source trusted on both sides of the
That is
aisle.
funny.
But on the whole, just 13% of news outlets are more likely to be trusted than distrusted by members of both parties. And those that are somewhat bipartisan are focused, at least in name, on the economy or financial news. These include, by the way, Business Insider, the Financial Times, Forbes, The Economist, and the Wall Street Journal. So with wide mistrust plaguing the American media landscape, I had to wonder, is this sense of bias unique to the United States? Yes and no. Europe is by no means immune to fake news.
Here we have fake news.
It's fake news.
Fake news.
In the EU, spreading false or misleading information is not generally illegal. Freedom of expression includes the right to express incorrect views. And the distinction between fake news and legitimate opinion is often contested. Despite the EU's semi-recent decision to ban Russian media outlets Russia Today and Sputnik from broadcasting in the European Union, policymakers generally recognize that simply banning disinformation is not a realistic or desirable option. Canada, France, and Germany sanction hate speech while broadly encouraging a plurality of opinion and fact-based reporting by broadcasters and the print media. This means that in Europe specifically, fake news is largely concentrated on social media. The recently passed Digital Services Act by the EU is the general response to this, addressing illegal content, transparent advertising, and disinformation. But if we take social media out of the equation and really just look at mass media, that being primarily TV broadcasting and newspapers, there is a much greater degree of balance and neutrality when it comes to Western European nations' news media outlets. And in my opinion, that's because public news media plays a much more prominent role in Western Europe than it does in the United States. In 7 Western European countries surveyed by Pew, the top main source for news is a public news organization, such as the BBC in the UK, the SVT in Sweden, or the ARD in Germany, rather than a private one. And again, this is in strong contrast to the United States, where the largest public news outlets, NPR and PBS, rank far lower than many of the country's private news outlets. A lot of European countries rely predominantly on nonpartisan TV channels as their primary news outlet. And because they're financed primarily with mandatory fees, they have a duty to provide content that is both educational and objective. So for example, here in Germany, in accordance with the Interstate Broadcasting Treaty, the public broadcasters, with the ARD and the ZDF being the 2 largest, are obligated to maintain balance, and in particular, to maintain political balance. Now, I do think you could make the argument that the ARD leans a little bit to the left and the ZDF a little bit to the right, but these are nowhere near as polarizing left-right outlets as Fox News and CNN in the United States. Quite frankly, if something like Fox News was to try to do business in Germany, it would likely get into legal trouble and probably lose its broadcasting license for lack of balance. By German standards, they are not considered a news channel.
Yeah, you haven't seen it?
No!
Yeah, and he still won.
But a propaganda network. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't very popular publications and media outlets that clearly and heavily cater to one particular partisan point of view. But they aren't going to be funded by public institutions. And because Europeans have a high degree of media literacy, they aren't likely going to confuse a political echo chamber with objective news reporting. But of course, Europe isn't a monolith, and you're gonna see differences on both the reliability of the reporting.
Sorry, I have to go back for this.
Echo chamber.
Trump slams Meghan Markle. Trump won't deport Prince Harry as he has enough problems with wife. Because they're living in States. He's not American. So I wonder how that was sorted.
Objective news reporting. But of course, Europe isn't a monolith, and you're going to see differences on both the reliability of the reporting and the accuracy of that reporting from one country to the next. As this graph shows, level of trust in the media are the highest in Finland, the Netherlands, and Sweden, and the lowest in Greece, Slovenia, and Croatia. In general, trust in the media is highest in the Nordic, Baltic, and Western member states, and the lowest in the southern and eastern member states, although
looks like
there are some exceptions. Yeah. But at a broad level, both everyday viewers and experts agree, European news media outlets are highly reputable and objective. An analysis of 226 news outlets across 24 European news markets by the University of Oxford found consistent evidence that the public generally has a high degree of trust in news outlets that experts also believe provide accurate information on facts, backed by credible sources and expertise. But before I get too much further into the video, I want to give a big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. If you've been following my channel for some time, you know that about 2.5 years ago, I decided to leave academia and pursue online content creation full-time as my job. And while I love what I do and recently hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel, by the way, thank you, being successful means that I have to wear a lot of hats. I'm a researcher, a writer, a filmmaker, an editor, a project manager, a social media manager, an administrator, an accountant, and oh yeah, a mom and a partner. But I do not do all of these roles perfectly, and to be completely honest with you, I've never been somebody who's been naturally gifted at good time management. I personally wanted to make a bigger effort to increase my productivity, and one of the best tools that I've used to work on this is Skillshare. In fact, I recently took this Productivity for Creators Systems, Organization, and Workflow course by Ali Abdal, a YouTuber, podcaster, entrepreneur, and online teacher on Skillshare, to learn more about how I can manage all of my interests efficiently and effectively. But the learning opportunities don't stop there. Thanks to my membership with Skillshare, I have unlimited access to an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity and learn new skills. So if you're interested in learning something new, Skillshare is the perfect place to start. From photography and illustration to graphic design, freelancing to music theory and creative writing, you can find classes that will match your goals and interests. And since Skillshare is a platform that is designed by creatives for creatives, classes are taught by industry experts excited to share their tools, techniques, and professional journeys with members. So
with cybersecurity solutions from Vodafone.
Anything to say as an American living in Europe?
I would watch CNN as a trustful source of news, but is it like Fox News?
Yeah, but leaning left. I knew that, but I am leaning left myself, so.
Yeah.
I would rather information from CNN than Fox News. Woof, that was quick. But yeah, they kind of leaning left. So that's where it comes to. Democrats are gonna be watching CNN and the Republicans are gonna be watching Fox News. There is not so much of stuff like that in Europe. I'm Polish, so yeah, not everything is like that everywhere in Europe. So it's actually happening like that in Poland too. So there's a TVN, and it would be mostly watched by people that actually going kind of more towards left as well. Now the situation is not exactly the same as it is in America, because it's just the left and the right in Poland and in America is slightly different too. Like it's not as stark differences in Poland than it is in America, but I think that, and then well now it's kind of changed because we do have national television, and when the PiS party had the reign of the government and stuff, it was very leaning towards actually nearly a propaganda. But again, I'm not objective because I am against this party. I'm PO. So basically, yeah, I'm seeing it like that. So if I be for that party, I'd probably be saying, oh, that's national television. It was great, and they always showing lots of great information and stuff like that. But no, yeah. So I'm not objective in that way, obviously. So yeah. Yeah. But there is this thing that's called, basically, it's a website when you go, if you're looking for information for news and stuff, and they're showing you what's, how to look for, I think it's the ground or something like that. And they're showing you the newscaster news, media, and stuff like that, to which way they're leaning and how it is. So it's actually pretty good if you're looking for like news and stuff every day. Just go into them.
Down below in the description of this video, the first 500 people to use my link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today. Now, in anticipation of this criticism in the comment section, I want to address a caveat to this discussion of bias and the mass media. Although public broadcasters are, as their name suggests, funded publicly, they are nonetheless independent news organizations in Western Europe, with their independence and freedom of press enshrined in most constitutions. Calling the BBC in Great Britain or the ARD here in Germany the same as Russia Today because they are both state-sponsored media is a gross mischaracterization of them. That being said, as right-wing, nationalist, and populist parties grow in favor, they have also taken aim at public broadcasters, promoting the general suspicion that they no longer report freely, but simply tout the opinions and the favors of the quote-unquote left. Even in the United States, PBS, largely ranked highly for their neutrality and wholesome content, has recently come under fire during the Trump administration for being quote-unquote woke.
We're simply saying that these institutions which are pushing leftism in our country cannot be taking taxpayer dollars.
But the thing is, you kind of have to ask the question, are these TV broadcasters actually left? or simply promoting a worldview that appears to be left from someone on the right. And this sounds pedantic, but it's an important distinction. At an international level, most public broadcasters, which are labeled as neutral or center in Europe, are generally going to be seen as left-leaning by most American viewers because, well, the left and right are subjective and are highly dependent on the prevailing political ideology. And that goes both ways. A report like this one, labeling Biden's far-left progressive policies, is utterly laughable to most Europeans. After all, the US Democratic Party would be considered staunchly center-right by most Western European standards.
Well, actually, I would like to correct something. I don't want to be impolite, but you just labeled our party as right-wing, which is not correct in my perspective. So we perceive ourselves standing in the middle.
But where and how do we draw this line between bias and balance? An international comparative study by Harvard University in 2017 found that 98% of portrayals of Trump in his first 100 days of office by the ARD in Germany were negative, more than anywhere else in the world, by the way. Now, you don't have to like Donald Trump, but these figures don't exactly express a politically balanced press landscape. But at the same time, if someone appears to be a fascist, power-hungry, narcissistic dictator from your world point of view, having someone scold you for not writing nice things about him seems weird.
German
right?
broadcasters,
You know they say if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Election in America. Do you see how those people were
keep going.
like,
I don't know where that came
down.
from. Go ahead.
And that's just the thing, right? What is neutral and what is biased is a constantly moving metric. And as political polling becomes more and more right-leaning, so too might the press. And by the way, I don't bring any of this up as a way to sort of exonerate the media for their lack of objective reporting. But reporters and journalists aren't umpires calling bats and strikes. Even the stories we cover and the language we use to describe them are subjective and loaded with meaning. I mean, do we remember the outrage when America's most beloved weatherman, Al Roker, dared to correlate patterns of extreme weather as a product of climate change? Yeah, even on-air meteorologists were somehow the target in the culture wars, it seems. But ultimately, when you take a look at the polling and the data around media and public trust, you have to factor in prevailing political ideology. Those who embrace populist views are less likely to trust their public news media than those who don't. And that's regardless of where they live. And furthermore, trust in government is also related to media satisfaction at the individual level. In most countries, people who support the political party currently in power are more satisfied with the performance of their news media than those who do not support the governing party. Interestingly, the United States is one of only a few countries on the planet where governing party supporters are less satisfied with their news media than non-supporters. After all, Republicans not only hold the presidency, the House, and the Senate, but also have a supermajority in the Supreme Court. Yet they significantly distrust the media more than Democrats. And you don't have to take my word for it. If you walk into any American diner for some counter banter, you are likely going to run into someone who says this. Nearly every news organization that feigns objectivity is heavily slanted towards the left. And the mass media is in cahoots with the Democrats to defeat Republicans and undermine Donald Trump.
So how come that they won? I just don't get that. If that's true, how did they won? You don't know. You have no opinion, aren't you?
Not really. I mean, you gotta look online, see how he won.
Oh yeah, online is definitely the way to go.
Fox News.
Yeah. Alright, so we'll be back because this is longer and we actually don't have much to say about it now. So yeah. See ya! Bye! Alright, we're back and we're just gonna jump back in. I'm getting cold here.
But why do they feel that way? Well, they might be partially correct. In the US, like a lot of North American and Western European nations, the press corps is mostly made up of liberals. Conservative outlets are not as shy about labeling themselves as such. In some cases, it's a badge of honor. But for as loud and noticeable as they might be, they aren't actually all that common. Most journalists, even at major news broadcasters, are gonna be college educated, from middle to upper class families, and live in predominantly left-leaning cities. To some degree, they mirror the ideologies of the coastal elites. They're less likely to own a firearm, more likely to support LGBTQ inclusion, and are less likely to go to church. And so even if you're a news organization who makes it your mission to stay objective, well, to quote A.G. Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, if your press corps is mostly made up of one type of person who votes one type of way, it would be impossible not to be influenced by your prior beliefs and gaps in knowledge. But does this biased viewpoint rise to the degree of conspiracy to where they're silencing voices or working in cahoots to undermine a political administration? Well, it's certainly an enticing conspiracy theory, but in reality, there's very little evidence to suggest that this is the case, especially when it comes to the current administration in the United States. In fact, many experts in political psychology make the case that the liberal media, in an effort to not be biased, inadvertently contributed to right-wing parties and their candidates' rise to power. Take what happened in the 2016 election in the United States as a semi-recent, painful example. Journalists and editors didn't want to be accused of unfairly laying more critique at one candidate than the other. So, in an effort to criticize both campaigns, the Hillary Clinton email scandal took up an unworthy weight in public discourse when compared to the myriad of scandals of the Trump campaign. And now, the role that media coverage played in the outcome of that particular election is, of course, up for debate. But while Trump might certainly be the most vocal in his disdain for the quote-unquote liberal woke media, he certainly isn't the first to be at odds with them. The first US executive administration to have concerns about the quote-unquote media and ushering in, quote, the mainstream media into the American lexicon wasn't a conservative at all, but rather the Nixon White House. Nixon regularly sensed that reporters held a bias against him, and according to William Safire, Nixon's speechwriter, described in his memoir that Nixon judged journalists to be his opponents and declared to his staff that, quote, the press is the enemy. And you know, when I look at this issue of bias in the media, particularly from a point of comparison between the United States and Europe, it's also hard for me to not see this as being a product of both history and ignorance. And gosh, I wish there was a better word for it than that, but I kind of got to call it for what it is. The United States has always been characterized by a degree of intellectual isolationism, while Europe has had centuries of close connections, pleasant or not, with other countries and cultures. And this connection obviously affects the appetites of consumers. They watch and learn far more about what is happening internationally than American viewers. And because the public news sources in Europe are both educational and objective, and watched by the majority of citizens, public sentiment about critical issues tend to be much more unified. So while I fully recognize that this subject of an American-centric point of view is probably its own video and a separate discussion for another day, I feel like I kind of have to bring it up, because if we're talking about bias and the media, bias is not just left versus right or liberal versus conservative, but also bias in how we learn, observe, and understand critical discourse. And the sad reality is that in the pursuit of clickbait content centered on conflicts and personalities, Americans end up following each other into confirmation bubbles. The more biased our media reporting is, the more fractured public opinion ends up being. So that all brings me to the final question of this video. I would love to hear from you down in the comment section about how you feel your media sources are on being biased or not. And if you do feel like you're getting a biased story, how likely are you to search out an opposing point of view in order to make yourself more informed? In other words, how do you make sure you're getting all of the important sides of a story? Again, I'd love to hear from you, so let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, if you enjoyed what you saw today, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from Type Ashton, hit that subscribe button. So I'll see you next Sunday. Cheers!
Interesting.
Interesting. I have nothing to say though, aren't you?
No.
Neither do I actually, because I do agree with her. Just a lot of things that she gave, I don't really have much to add to it. It's just like not like I can.
It's not like burgers or video games. So
yeah. We don't really watch that much news either, so maybe that was the wrong choice.
Al Jazeera.
Yeah, right. When did you watch the Al Jazeera last time?
Not long ago. Then I was at iWan, but that's more of a it's an Indian news channel, but they're more towards Russia on their news.
Are they?
Yeah. So I stopped watching them.
Oh.
And then to get the balls in that one.
Yeah. Politics are just.
Yeah. It's hard to find proper news channels. Like I watched YouTubers more often.
Yeah, but the YouTubers are even more biased.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Depends where they're located. If their interests are aligned with mine.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of. The video was very good, but we just have nothing to add.
Yeah.
Not much anyway. So thank you very much for watching. I see you tomorrow and you see Eric next week. Bye.